Hello, and welcome to the Outcry Theatre Podcast. I'm Becca Johnson-Spinos, and I'm the Artistic Director of Outcry Theatre. Every episode of this podcast delves into the artistic process of creating theatre. This episode is about our current production of The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This is a brand new adaptation by Jason and Becca Johnson-Spinos. Hi, this is Miss Becca. I'm here with some of the stars of The Great Gatsby. Do you guys want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Brayden Lawrence, and I'm playing Nick Carraway.
Hi, I'm Peyton Nicholson, and I'm playing Jay Gatsby.
Hi, I'm Calin, and I'm playing Nick Carraway.
So I know that The Great Gatsby is literally the great American novel, and almost everyone has read it, but tell me a little bit about The Great Gatsby. What's it all about?
Okay, so The Great Gatsby is about Nick Carraway, and he comes to New York in the middle of the Roaring '20s, and while he's there, he befriends his next-door neighbor, who is a millionaire, named Jay Gatsby, and kind of gets entangled in his life and his love affairs and with the other people around him. And because it's in the '20s, obviously prohibition is a thing, so there's tons of alcohol everywhere being sold and drank illegally, and it's this big era of partying and dancing and expression.
I've been talking about doing this story for a very long time, and I have a couple of questions that are sort of wrapped up in that. So it means that some of these roles have become some like dream roles for actors that have worked with me for a long time, and also I know people who have loved this story for a long time are also in this room. But really I want you to talk about like the process of taking these sort of like epic roles that everyone knows on and bringing them to life, especially knowing that like some of these, this was like so important to do this.
The first time I read The Great Gatsby was in middle school, and I've loved the story ever since. It's been kind of like a dream of mine to always play this character. I loved the movie. I just love Nick's character specifically. I've always loved him. I love all the characters of the story, and it's been kind of a hard process whenever you finally get to play this dream role, because you're figuring him out and you want to do him as much justice as you can, as much as you, if you weren't in this role, would want to see someone give this role justice.
Okay, so I actually didn't read the Great Gatsby book, and I didn't really even know about it until the announcement of this show. And so when I heard the announcement, I immediately watched the movie, and I loved it. I especially loved the portrayals of Nick and Gatsby by Tobey Maguire and Leonardo DiCaprio. I thought they were absolutely brilliant, and I thought Tobey just did a marvelous job making Nick feel real and just capturing everything about him. It has been challenging. There are a lot to this character, especially in the big monologues that he has to give.
For me, playing Gatsby has been this process of just trying to figure out how you make someone who seems so like unreachable and like so mythical and like made up feel real, and just try and like navigate why he feels the way he does, why he does these crazy things he does.
So we at Outcry have been waiting patiently for this novel to go into the public domain, and this is a brand new adaptation of this novel written by Mr. Jay and myself. So you guys are obviously the first people to play this particular version of these characters. What makes our adaptation unique, and what does our adaptation and I guess production as a whole through the adaptation bring to the story, or maybe do differently than what another adaptation would be?
Well, this script is definitely faithful to the book and in the movie in a lot of ways. I feel like what it does more is express Nick's inner thoughts a lot more, in the way that everything that he says is told in like this particularly crafted way to have like multiple meanings in like one singular sentence. And I think that this script does a really good job of doing all that?
For me, I think the coolest part about our adaptation is that we have all these like dances and songs and live music from Cliffspringer, and I think all of those really like wrap you into the story and like really show, okay, we're in the Roaring 20s, people are singing songs, we're doing crazy dances full of all these famous moves from the 20s, and I think not only has that been really fun, I think it's been really interesting to see how that can like totally like shift the mood of the story and create cool transitions between scenes and things that are going on.
So The Great Gatsby has a lot of unique symbols and motifs and kind of big ideas that occur throughout, which is why it is studied so often in school, because it really like lends itself to an English class talking about things. I'm talking about, for example, the green light, the Valley of Ashes, Dr. TJ, etc. What's your favorite of the big things and why?
In Gatsby fashion, my favorite like whole theme of the show would have to be the green light, because I think while in this instance, like obviously Gatsby's dream is not going to be what everybody else's dream is going to be, and his green light is not going to be like this widely accepted green light. But I think everybody has their own green light, and I think through watching the show, they're able to see like how his like constant pursuit and like his continuing to try and get what he wants doesn't always work out for him. And so I think it's almost like this like eye-opening experience, and that people can like sit back and be like, what do I want? Is this really what I want? And just like think about what they want in life. And I think that's really interesting, and not a lot of stories do that. And I think with the symbolism with the green light, it's just like a really clever way to do so.
I think my favorite symbol of the story is the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, which, if you don't know what those are, basically it's this big billboard in the Valley of Ashes, which is this very impoverished neighborhood that you have to pass through before you get to New York. And you see Myrtle die under these eyes, and George Wilson, Myrtle's husband, watches, like references the sign as the eyes of God. And basically he's watching all these characters go in and out of New York and the different things that are happening in their lives. And I mean, the first time that Nick sees the eyes of Eckelberg, it's this very ominous and dark feeling that he gets from them, and I think that's what everyone feels whenever they look into these eyes of God per se. But yeah, I think that it's a really cool symbol, and I love that Myrtle dies right in front of them.
I think my favorite symbolism in the show would definitely have to be the Valley of Ashes. It's this completely just dark, dull, bleak, just blob of dust that just sits right before New York. And it's this huge contrasting thing. It's like you see this before you get to New York and you're just confused. Like what is this doing here? Like right before this bright, vibrant city. And there's this really beautiful dance right before Nick and Tom get off the train where all the people on the train just become the Valley of Ashes. They all, all their movements represent the ashes flying everywhere and turning the atmosphere around them just a gray, bleak, smoky dust. That movement in particular is a really cool movement piece that we have in this show.
For me, there are two things that were important to me symbol-wise going into this, and they're maybe not the traditional things, but I'm obsessed with Jay Gatsby's pink suit, which is a thing he wears near the end of the story. And Tom immediately sees this sort of ridiculous, gaudy, over-the-top suit and spots it as this fraudulent thing that someone who had a lot of money would never, authentically had a lot of money in an old money way, would never wear because it's ostentatious and over the top. And it's mentioned and talked about a lot in the book, but I've sort of heightened it by having Tom call Gatsby a pig and refer to Gatsby's house as a pigsty. And it's all related to this pink suit and how if you take this pink suit off of him, he wouldn't be anything. He would be this invisible man. The other thing for me that's really important in the book is Gatsby's wave. At the end of the first party, when Nick is sort of in awe of Gatsby. He's supposed to be at the top of the steps of his mansion, and he turns back to Nick and he holds up his hand in this wave. And after Gatsby's about to leave for the last time, when Nick sees him for the last time, he waves again, and Nick remembers that moment and thinking about how all these people came to his house. They had this expectation of who he was as this person, and he's different than that. And it's this sort of sad wave, but happy at the same time. And we do it a whole bunch in our show. What is either the most fun part, you can choose one, the most fun part or the hardest part about playing this character?
I think equally the most fun and hard part about playing Nick is all the parts where we talk to the audience, because when we talk to the audience, those are the parts where we have the most amount of lines to say. And while it is hard, it is definitely a lot of fun to get to express with the audience, because normally you don't get to do that. But in this play, as the narrator, you get to talk to the audience a lot, and especially you get to tell them everything that none of the other characters get to know. And I think that's something that's a really fun we get to do.
It's hard because you have to try and decipher what he's talking about and what he's meaning to say and how he's saying these things and expressing them. But it's also really fun to be able to pull the audience in and really feel the energy of the room shift to you, and like really just telling straightforward what Nick is feeling and what is going on.
My super fun thing is something that's like specific to our show, and it's that in all of our party scenes, Gatsby gets to be involved in all of the parties, and that's something in the book where you don't really see Gatsby at all the parties, but in ours, Gatsby is dancing at these parties and he's having fun, and the dances for the first and the second party in the show are some of my favorite parts. And so I think just getting to do that, while it's something small, it's just really fun. That's different than what the normal is.
So why is The Great Gatsby still relevant, and why is it important to tell this story in 2021?
Like I was talking about earlier with the green light, I think this is a story where everyone can just kind of like sit back and be like, what do I want in my life? And I think thinking about it in that way, and just like people like being like, I wonder what my green light in my life is. I think it almost gives like people like, now I need to like get my green light. After they've seen this story, they're like, okay, now it's my turn. This is my story. And I think in a time like this, where we're just coming out of such a really bad year, I think everyone's kind of like probably had like a lot of people have had complete shifts in their life, and they're coming into like a new era of themselves. And I think being able to like have people figure out what they want to do with their life, who they are, I think is really important. And I think this story really like helps boost that idea.
Kind of echoing Peyton, I think that it's obviously very important to take a step back and wonder what your green light is and what your goals are and how you are like Gatsby and trying to achieve them. And I think that it's also very important to look at the characters surrounding Gatsby and, as Nick says, how careless they are, and kind of what you have to watch out for in the people around you, and realize that they can be careless. They can be just as selfish as Tom and Daisy and Jordan, and realizing who your Nick is as a Gatsby. And I think that's very important. Also, the death of the American dream, the death of this perfect life that you thought you were going to live, and you thought you were a millionaire and you were going to get the girl and you were going to have everything, and it doesn't happen. And I think that Fitzgerald was very bold in making the ending that he did, because it was a big slap in the face, which I think is very real and very relevant in America today.
While this play is set in the same time 100 years later, still in the 20s, it is definitely a very different 20s that we have been living in so far, with all of us basically just been isolated from each other this whole time. That definitely gives us more to look forward to with our green light. You know, we've been just stuck in our houses for all this time, wanting to do something, just anything, no matter how big or small it is, just anything. We've been reaching for that green light for so long, and it seems like we're so close to the end of it, we can almost reach it. And I think that that's very relevant to us today.
For me, I read this book in high school and I didn't get it. And then I read it again when I turned 30 and I suddenly understood it like deeply. Nick turns 30 throughout the course of the novel, and Gatsby's in his early 30s. Most of these characters are around 30. It was a time when I was 30. I'm now almost 40, which is crazy. But when I turned 30, I was in a place where I had graduated from grad school and I was trying to be a professional director in New York City. And I felt incredibly lost, and I felt like I hadn't achieved any of the things that I thought I was going to achieve. I had all these goals that I couldn't quite grasp. And I think The Great Gatsby perfectly encapsulates the idea of what we're taught we're supposed to be in America. We're supposed to have these goals that we're constantly chasing and these dreams that we're constantly fighting for. A bigger house, more money, more fun, the best, most gorgeous partner, all of these things. And that's what we're constantly striving for, but we can't quite achieve them, and B, like, is this even the goals that we should be chasing? And I'm someone who works every single day and strives for things every single day. Unless we have a huge cultural shift, I think it will always be the most American story of failure and loss and hope and love. Thank you so much for joining us for our latest episode of the Outcry Theatre Podcast. This podcast has been produced by me, Becca Johnson-Spinos, and edited by Jason Johnson-Spinos. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your theater-loving friends.